Okay, so you sent over The Future of European Competitiveness.
Yeah,
Quite the dense read, right?
it's a beast.
It is a beast of a report. We're here to kind of like break this down into bite-sized pieces for you, ditching the economic jargon, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Get you what you really need to know.
It's ambitious, that's for sure. I mean, this report dives into everything
It really does.
from energy and specific industries to even, like the skills gap
Yeah.
and even governance.
Exactly. So we're talking real deep dive today,
Right.
uncovering like those hidden gems.
Yeah.
The aha moments, the things that'll give you a crystal clear picture of where the EU stands
Right.
in the global arena, how they're planning to up their game. Think of it like a strategic briefing minus the stuffy boardroom.
Yeah. I like that. It's about connecting those dots, understanding not just the what but the why
Exactly.
behind these elements of the EU's competitive landscape.
Exactly, and I think that's what we really want to do today. So let's jump right into the thick of it. Let's start with energy. The report's really hammering home this idea of decarbonization as this massive opportunity for the EU.
Right.
But it doesn't shy away from the potential bumps in the road either.
Right.
Kind of makes you think about that 2022-2023 energy crisis, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly a timely comparison.
Yeah.
But this time the challenge isn't just about navigating geopolitics, right? It's about whether the EU can actually build a renewable energy infrastructure that's robust enough to meet future demands.
And that's where things get really interesting. I mean, the report really highlights this often overlooked aspect
Yes.
of grid capacity,
Yeah.
stating that grid investments need to essentially match spending on clean power generation.
Yeah, essentially for every euro invested in wind farms, solar panels, another euro needs to be pumped into the grid
Wow.
just to be able to handle that new energy.
So for every euro invested in wind farms or solar panels, another euro needs to be pumped into the grid just to handle that new energy.
Yeah.
That's a hefty price tag.
Yeah, it is.
And what about the role of AI in all of this? Because the report touches upon this, and you know me, I always find this fascinating. And we're talking optimizing energy grids, which sounds fantastic on paper, but then there's the potential for AI to actually increase energy demands through data centers and the like. Talk about a double-edged sword.
It's a classic example of the delicate balance we need to strike. Because while AI holds this immense potential to revolutionize energy management, we also have to consider its own hunger for power, right?
Yeah.
So it raises this crucial question for all of us. How can we harness these technological advancements while also mitigating their potential strain on the very infrastructure they're meant to optimize?
A tightrope walk, that's for sure.
It is.
Speaking of delicate balances, let's shift gears to a specific industry that's feeling the heat of global competition.
Yeah.
Automotive. Now, this one was a real eye-opener for me. Did you know that car production costs in the EU are a staggering 30% higher than in China?
30%. That's not just a small difference. That's a significant gap.
Huge.
That puts immense pressure on EU car makers. And when you factor in China's rapid advancements in EV performance and software, you begin to see, okay,
Yeah.
the potential challenges ahead.
It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, facing intense cost pressure while also needing to innovate at lightning speed. And it doesn't end there. The report goes on to highlight this critical issue of raw materials.
Yes,
Specifically, the EU's heavy reliance on imports for battery production.
that's right. The report states that by 2030, almost none of the EU's lithium needs, a crucial component for batteries, will be met by European projects.
Wow.
So this heavy dependence on external sources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only creates this economic vulnerability,
Right.
but also raises concerns about strategic autonomy in a world where supply chains are increasingly politicized.
It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand. It really underscores the scale of the challenge. It's not just about assembling cars. It's about securing the entire ecosystem, from raw materials to technological innovation.
Exactly. And this need for a holistic approach, one that balances economic competitiveness with strategic considerations, is a recurring theme throughout the report, particularly when we look at the EU's ambitions in space.
Speaking of reaching for the stars, this is where it gets really interesting. Did you know that the EU actually had to rely on SpaceX rockets because they've fallen behind in developing their own commercial launchers?
It's a stark reminder of the consequences of falling behind in a rapidly evolving sector.
Yeah.
And the report suggests this isn't just a matter of technological prowess,
Yeah.
it's also about funding.
Yeah, and the numbers they're pretty stark. We're talking about a massive funding gap holding back EU space companies. The report states that U.S. private investment in space is around 4 billion euros, while the EU lags behind at a mere 1 billion.
Wow.
Can they really hope to compete on a global scale with that kind of disparity in investment?
It begs the question, can the EU afford to maintain its current approach, relying on international collaboration and a less commercially driven model?
Right.
Or does it need a fundamental shift in strategy, injecting more private capital, adopting a more assertive posture in this global space race? It's a complex dilemma
It is.
with no easy answers. No, not at all. And speaking of complex dilemmas, let's turn our attention to another area where the EU is facing some tough choices: defense.
Okay.
And here's a statistic that really makes you think. 78% of EU defense procurement spending went to non-EU suppliers. And the biggest winner in that equation,
Yeah.
you guessed it, the U.S., snagging a whopping 63% of that pie.
Right.
Kind of ironic when you consider the EU's push for strategic autonomy, wouldn't you say?
It certainly highlights a potential vulnerability, and the report drives this point home by noting that the U.S. market remains largely closed to EU defense companies, so...
It's a bit of a one-way street, wouldn't you say?
It is, yeah.
It does make you wonder about the balance of power in that relationship. It's like they're pouring money into defense, but a big chunk of it is flowing right back out.
Yep.
So where does that leave the EU in terms of building up its own defense industry and achieving that goal of strategic autonomy?
It's a question that leads us right into our next big topic. Research and innovation, or R&I, as the report calls it. And one of the most striking takeaways here is China's meteoric rise as an innovation powerhouse.
Yeah, it's impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
The report attributes this success to a laser focus on STEM education and a strategic approach to attracting top talent back from overseas.
Yeah.
To turning brain drain into brain gain.
Right.
And it's paying off. It does make you wonder if the EU could learn a thing or two from that playbook. But there's another point here that really jumped out at me. The report takes a pretty critical look at the EU's innovation clusters. And honestly, I was surprised by what they found. You'd think with all the brilliant minds and cutting-edge research happening in Europe, they'd be leading the pack, right?
You'd think so, but the numbers tell a different story.
Yeah.
The report highlights that there's only one EU cluster in the global top 20. Compare that to the US with 6 and China with 7. It paints a pretty clear picture of where the EU stands in terms of fostering those hubs of innovation.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call for sure.
Yeah.
And it ties into this broader theme of the EU needing to not just keep pace, but set the pace in a rapidly changing world.
Right.
Now, let's shift gears to a topic that's near and dear to my heart: the skills gap. This is something I'm always harping on about, but the statistics in this report really drove the point home. Get this, 42% of Europeans lack basic digital skills.
Wow.
In this day and age, that's a staggering figure.
It's a significant challenge, and the report connects this directly to the difficulties EU businesses are facing in the digital transition. It's not just about having the latest technology, it's about having a workforce that's equipped with the skills to use it effectively.
Exactly. It's like having a Formula One race car,
Right.
but lacking a skilled driver. You're not going to win any races that way.
Exactly.
And the report makes it clear that simply throwing more money at education and training isn't going to cut it.
Right. It's about quality over quantity. The report calls for a complete overhaul, revamp of education and training systems with a focus on curriculum reform, robust skill certification, and much closer collaboration between educational institutions and the business world.
It's about future-proofing the workforce, making sure people have the skills they need, not just for the jobs of today, but for the jobs of tomorrow,
Right.
which are evolving faster than ever.
Yes.
Now, all of this ties into another crucial area the report dives into: financing and competition policy. And one of the key comparisons they make here is between the EU and U.S. investment landscapes. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act has really shaken things up, and the report acknowledges that accessing EU funds can feel like navigating a labyrinth.
Yeah, it's a valid point. The U.S. seems to have adopted a more proactive, some might even say aggressive approach to attracting investment in these key industries.
It's like they're rolling out the red carpet while the EU is still stuck in the planning phase.
Yeah. That's
A bit of an oversimplification.
It is a bit of an oversimplification, but the report does call for a more streamlined and strategic approach. And that brings us to a particularly thought-provoking section where they advocate for a revamp of competition policy itself.
Okay.
They suggest that the EU needs to move beyond these traditional models and adopt a more dynamic approach, one that factors in the critical role of innovation.
Okay, so less about clinging to like outdated rules and more about fostering an environment where innovation can flourish. I like the
Exact.
sound of that.
They even go so far as to propose what they call an innovation defense
Oh, wow.
for mergers,
Interesting.
particularly in cases where a merger might actually strengthen the EU's global competitiveness, even if it means bending the traditional rules a bit.
So they're saying that in certain circumstances, bigger might actually be better.
Potentially. Yeah.
If it means the EU can compete on a global scale and stay ahead of the curve,
Right.
it's a bold stance, that's for sure.
It is. It highlights the fact that the old playbook might not cut it in a world of rapid technological advancement and fierce global competition.
It's about adapting to the new reality, which brings us to our final topic, governance. And one thing that really stood out to me in this section was the issue of regulatory burden on EU businesses.
Yeah.
They use GDPR as an example, pointing out that, while data protection is obviously crucial,
Right.
the sheer complexity of the regulation can create a real headache for businesses, particularly smaller ones.
It speaks to a broader theme that runs throughout the report.
Hmm.
The need for simplification and harmonization across the EU.
Right.
It's about striking that delicate balance between having robust regulations in place to protect consumers, workers, the environment, while also creating an environment where businesses can thrive.
Right. It's that classic balancing act, right?
Here.
Protecting important values while also fostering innovation and economic growth.
Yeah.
How do you walk that tightrope?
That's the million-dollar question.
Mhm.
And the report offers a potential solution in the form of something they call a competitiveness coordination framework.
Okay.
I know, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Don't worry, I think I got it.
Mhm.
It's about getting everyone on the same page.
Yeah.
Working together more effectively.
Exactly. It's about streamlining EU actions, cutting through the bureaucracy, and involving all the key stakeholders, member states, industry experts, businesses themselves in a more agile and strategic way. It's about moving beyond the EU's traditional consensus-based approach, which can be slow and cumbersome, and embracing a more proactive and coordinated strategy to ensure they remain competitive on the global stage.
It's about streamlining, strategizing, and maybe even shaking things up a bit. Sounds like the EU's facing a real crossroads, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The decisions they make in the coming years will have far-reaching implications, not just for the EU itself, but for the global economy as a whole.
It's a pivotal moment, that's for sure. But that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating, right? We've uncovered some real eye-openers today, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We've explored the challenges from, like you said, energy dependence and supply chain vulnerabilities to a persistent skills gap.
Yeah.
The need for a more agile and innovative approach to governance.
And we've also uncovered some really big opportunities, I think, for the EU to leverage its strengths.
Yeah.
Its commitment to sustainability, its highly skilled workforce. I mean, it was a global leader in so many respects.
Right.
So it's about finding that path forward, that winning formula for success in a world that's only getting more competitive.
And that's where the report leaves us with a really thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
One that I believe goes to the very heart of the EU's identity in the 21st century.
Mm.
Can they successfully balance their commitment to these social values, to sustainability, with this urgent need to compete on this global scale?
It's a question with no easy answers. But I think it's a question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Right.
Because the choices the EU makes in the coming years will have ripple effects far beyond their own borders. It's about global leadership. It's about shaping the future of the global economy. And it's about defining what it means to be a responsible and competitive force in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. It is a balancing act, to be sure, but one that the EU, with its history of innovation, collaboration, a commitment to a better future, is uniquely positioned to tackle.
Well, there you have it. We've explored the complexities, we've pondered the dilemmas, we've uncovered those hidden gems of insight that will hopefully leave you feeling informed and maybe even a little bit inspired. Because ultimately, the future of European competitiveness isn't just about economic indicators and policy decisions, is it?
No, not at all. It's about people. It's about ideas. It's about this unwavering belief in progress and the power of collective action to shape a better future.
Well said. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the future of European competitiveness. It's a topic we'll certainly be revisiting as the story continues to unfold. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter most.